The Race F1 podcast is brought to you by Merrill. It's no secret that finances can get complicated. Like me, I'm sure many of you listening will have financial goals. Perhaps it's even saving up for that trip to a Grand Prix far afield. Whatever your goals are, from starting a business to saving for kids' college to getting more stamps in your passport, you want a straightforward path there. But life tends to have other plans, and things get in your way. Merrill understands that. That's why with a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalised plan that can help keep your money in sync with your life. So with the bull at your back, no matter what life brings, you get a clear path forward. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC.
Oh.
Hear that?
Okay. Thank you.
Etsy knows these aren't the sounds of holiday gifting. Well, not the ones you're hoping for. You want squeals of delight.
Woo!
Happy tears.
How did you?
And spontaneously written songs of joy.
I am so happy. Oh yeah.
Okay, the song needs a bit of work. But anyway, to get those reactions, make sure everyone on your list feels heard with handmade, handpicked, and designed gifts from small shops on Etsy. Gifts like personalized jewelry, custom artwork, cozy style items, vintage pieces, and home decor to celebrate all of your favorite people and their specific kind of special. For original gifts that say, I get you, Etsy has it.
The Athletic.
Jorge Martin really does look like he is on the brink of becoming MotoGP world champion, even though he's a satellite rider, after a Malaysian Grand Prix weekend which featured some absolutely thrilling, genuine wheel-to-wheel racing between the title contenders, but also another massive Pecco Bagnaia blunder. This is the Race MotoGP podcast. I'm Matt Beer. With me as ever are Val Khorounzhiy and Simon Patterson. Strange weekend for MotoGP. For much of it, we didn't know where the championship would be concluding, but it didn't really matter relative to everything going on in the region in Spain and Valencia where the championship should have been concluding. We will discuss that situation, MotoGP's handling of it, later in this podcast. We don't want to rush that bit, so let's talk about the on-track stuff first, and then we'll give due attention to everything that unfolded in the part of Spain that so many of the MotoGP family call home as well. We always bring in questions from the Race Members Club early in this podcast, and the theme of this week's has been overwhelmingly a kind of hand-raising what the hell is going on through the early laps of the Malaysian Grand Prix. Angelina, very early in the race, threw in the question, what on earth is Martin doing? By the end of the race, Angelina had calmed down and said her heart rate had soothed itself. She could now formulate sentences. But she said, you appreciate the two of them giving such exciting first laps, but you have to wonder why Jorge Martin would take such a risk. What Angelina's talking about, and Ian Farrell, Damon Needham, Eric Yip, Oscar Robledo, all threw in variations of this as well, were those epic opening laps of the Grand Prix in which Bagnaia and Martin were throwing their bikes at each other, having countless near misses, before finally Bagnaia emerged ahead and went on to win the race. Val, Simon, were you surprised to see them going so hard at it in the first few laps? Simon, you go first.
No, because that's the only way you can win a MotoGP race right now. Martin needed to get past before his tire pressure went through the roof and he was unable to get past. He went at it for 3 laps trying to make that work. And then his tire pressure went through the roof and he had to just settle to be second. And he knew that that was the inevitable conclusion of the race. The only reason I think that we didn't see it on Saturday in the sprint race is because Martin got the better start and then was able to get in front. And before Bagnaia had a real chance to try anything similar, his pressure went through the roof and he crashed. And I know he hit a bump at turn 9, but the tires always factor into it. You have to win a MotoGP race in the first 3 laps these days, essentially. And because the bikes are really hard to pass, you have to be super aggressive to make a move. And we saw 2 guys for 3 laps gloriously going at it with all the rage in the world to try and make that work. And it didn't work for Martin, and then it just kind of stopped. And here we are.
I think Martin raced with the knowledge that a double DNF would have ultimately been pretty good for him. And I think, yeah, maybe the logical part, the absolute, playing of the numbers part tells you that, just finish second. But it was not that simple. He had to move in the early stages of the race. He had just seen in the sprint that, Marc Marquez doesn't like Sepang, but Marc Marquez wasn't that far off in the sprint to where you could definitively 100,000% take for granted that he can just cruise to second. At the same time, he has a 24-point lead now, right? If he won, that would have been 34.
Yeah.
That's still a difference. He's favored to win now. If he was 34, it would have been game over, basically. If it was 34, he cruises to 10th or whatever on Sunday in Barcelona, and it's done. It's much less nervous. It's still, it still will be a bit of nerves, but it would be much, much simpler. It's still relatively simple, but I understand playing for those extra 5 points. I don't think either of them looked all that close to crashing at any point. Maybe sometimes they were a bit jockeying on the straight and coming a bit close to blows. Martin probably wasn't going to lose out hugely in that scenario, so I do genuinely see the logic of having a go. And once you realize you can't do it, once you realize the pace is too high and the risk would be too much to continue, roll off, you bring it home, which is basically exactly what happened.
You two are making this all sound so logical, which I slightly object to, because in the moment I'm with all the questioners who are basically saying, yeah, we get why Pecco was doing this. He had nothing to lose. Well, after the sprint crash, which we'll discuss in a bit more depth in a minute, Pecco just had to throw his bike at Martin and hope something went wrong for Martin. But one of you mentioned the idea of a double DNF being better for Martin. You can't guarantee when you're racing like that you're going to take both of you out or he'll take you out. There's a real chance of Martin falling there and Pecco getting 25 points. And suddenly that's not 34, that's not 24, that's like minus something, or would have been 4 points, which is completely wide open game on. Simon.
I've kind of been like picking at this idea of mine a little bit in debriefs with Jorge Martin over the last few weeks, and I'm more confident, having spoken to him about it than ever, that the fundamental thing is that he has to be riding like this to stay on the bike. His mistakes don't come when he's riding super aggressively. Like maybe they do a little bit for Bagnaia. His mistakes come whenever he's got a 5-second lead and loses concentration and thinks, oh, that's a pretty bird, and crashes. They don't come when he's in a battle, because he's a super aggressive rider. He's not as analytical as Bagnaia. He's not as metronomic as Bagnaia. So what ends up happening is that he ends up launching himself down the road whenever he has to not think, whenever he has to start thinking about his riding and start not riding the way he wants to. I genuinely felt like the most at risk of a crash he was all weekend wasn't the first 3 laps of Sunday's race. It was the last 3 laps of Saturday's race, because the pressure was off, and he has to be aggressive, and to be aggressive, you kind of have to have someone be aggressive with you, and that's where the secret to his performance comes from.
You're right about the double DNF. I mean, yeah, you can't guarantee that, and there's a bit of risk being baked in. I mean, it was very clean racing. It never felt like the two of them, like the one time it felt like the two of them came close to blows is turn 1 off the start. At was it the original start or the second start? I don't even remember. There were too many starts. There's too many starts. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, you can't guarantee a double retirement, and you don't want to play for a double retirement, certainly. But there weren't just the two of them on track, right? They hadn't shaken off Marc. Do you want to go deal with Marc instead? Is that something you would like to do? I mean, that's also strategically just not a good thing.
That's much worse, in fact, because he has nothing to lose.
Well, we touched on this around the Thai Grand Prix as well, though, where it did look to me like Marc Marquez was aware that he had a little bit to lose in terms of personal relationships and his new job if he just ploughed into Bagnaia at any point in these remaining races before 2025. Yeah, I do see your point, Simon, about Martin does his best work when he's on the edge of disaster, but not heading into disaster territory. And it's part of the magic of this season with both these riders is that you, even in the closing laps of the Grand Prix where they're running around 3 seconds apart, suddenly it got tense again. You couldn't guarantee that Martin wouldn't crash when it looked that was a sniff of Bagnaia pursuit. You couldn't guarantee that Bagnaia wouldn't fall off trying to like break away and lure Martin into going with him and making a mistake. Their error proneness is part of the charm of these title battles. I don't think it means they're subpar riders who wouldn't hold up against other great champions. Because you look at how they raced, you look at the lap records they're obliterating, they are phenomenally good riders, both of them. But the fact they've got this sort of haphazard quality as well is just making these two seasons so good.
I'm also convinced that, I'm more convinced than I was before that it is also just a product of having so much racing. I mean, you have 40 races, you're going to have more crashes, but you'll remember the crashes. And yeah, for me, almost, there's like too many races for the value of a championship, if that makes sense. It's more of a philosophical 100%. Point, but it feels weird that these guys both have to work a 40 race gauntlet for a title that 40 years ago would have been, 14 races? 15? 13.
I mean, 17 when I started in MotoGP. Yeah. And I'm not here that long.
Yeah, it's a little incongruent to me because this title, whoever wins it, and it's probably going to be Jorge Martin, is going to be devalued by the talk of the errors. And there have been errors. But I feel like there will not be given the due consideration of the fact we're racing so much more. Not even talking about like the differences in the bikes, how close, the pack is relative to what it used to be 15 years ago or whatever. Just how much racing there is, how many chances there are to throw it into the gravel. I mean, today I saw Mark crash out again, and I didn't think, that error-prone guy. I thought, well, he just kind of does that sometimes. I'm not entirely sure he's been scoring much more consistently than they have this season. I'd have to have a look. Would have been nice to do it before the episode, but what can you do? It's 40 races. People will be messing up. It's a lot.
One thought I had during the opening laps, which Ben Johnson from the Members Club has slightly echoed, he said, were those opening laps with Pecco and Martin what we're missing by not having a robust Michelin front tyre? Should throw in straight away there. I'm sure Michelin would love to have a robust front MotoGP tyre if some MotoGP teams would let them test that tyre a little bit so it could cope with the aero. That's another story. But yeah, I was watching that going, can we have that every week? Why have we watched so many processions this year when this is actually possible? Obviously, title on the line, nothing to lose for one rider, quite a lot to lose for the other. The psychology is very different come this race. But Simon, you were nodding pretty quickly there. Could we see this every week if the tyres were less of a consideration for the riders right now?
We used to see this every week. This used to be what the last 3 laps of races were like, not the first 3 laps.
Yeah, true.
This was what the 2019 season was like with Quartararo versus Marquez in the last 3 laps. It used to be like this all the time. Not all the time. Not every weekend. I'm not rose-tinted glasses. But we got these battles at the end of races, not the start. And we've lost that. How many last lap battles have we had this season? Le Mans, basically, is the only one that comes to mind. There's not been very many of them at all. And yeah, it's because the pressure spikes the front tire, and then everyone feels like they're riding on ice and aren't prepared to make these moves. Combined with the fact that there's a couple of really fast guys like Bagnaia, like Bastianini, like Martin, who you can't give any advantage to. So you basically give them the advantage that you have to give them to let your front tire come back down into pressure or into temperature so that it isn't awful. And by that point, they're gone and you're never getting them back. And that's essentially that's what happened. Martin trying to chase Bagnaia on Sunday. I don't think he wanted to let him right away from him, but once he let him away, Bagnaia had amazing pace and then it was just gone. It was game over. There was no holding on to the back of his coattails to try something at the end of races. And it's all linked to the front tire. There's no question about it in my mind.
bothers me less than it should, because again, like, this is going back to my previous point. I wouldn't want 40 races of this. I think that's too much of a toll on the competition. I do think that we have a clear example, for example, of the World Superbikes Championship, on the other hand, where Bagnaia and Martin are basically more or less within the same pace every weekend. I mean, maybe there's a slight difference. Like this weekend, Bagnaia had a little bit more, but it's a little bit. It's in a race situation, it's negatable. In World Superbikes, we've had a guy who's been quicker than everybody else for most of the season, and yet there have been enough rounds where others have been close enough to him. We've had more good racing in World Superbikes this year than in MotoGP. I mean, that's a problem, because the competitive order suggests that shouldn't necessarily be the case. So yeah, clearly there's an issue, but also sometimes boring races are fine for me. I don't know.
I just want to say I don't want 40 races of anything.
No, I know.
I just don't. It feels, now that we've got to this point in the season and I can look back on it a little bit, the last 6-7 weeks feels like they've devalued this title fight, because we've had 14 races in 7 weeks. It's insane. It's crazy. We've ran a championship from like 2002 in 7 weeks. It's mental. It devalues everything.
I think both of them have done enough this season to win a regular, normal MotoGP championship.
Yeah.
And this is not, for me, this is not a criticism of the format. This is not a format issue for me. The format, I still don't love the risks, but it is just, the weekend is consistently more entertaining. I do not miss the endless practice. Again, I'm on the record, cancel all practice. I hate it. But the 20 round calendar, man, it's too much. For me, it's just too much. I don't know. It's too much.
I mean, it'll be an interesting one to look back at the end of the season. We're trying to pick out like highlights and elements to discuss. There'll be so many things that we completely forgot at this point it even happened, because May, June seems so long ago and almost irrelevant. Last year, I liked the length of the calendar, not in terms of exhaustion, obviously, because even for someone just managing some content of it from the UK, it's a pretty tiring one. For people actually travelling the world around with it, like working in the carriages, must be completely excruciating at times. But last year, with the kind of change in narrative, with Pecco Bagnaia having the late season injury and wobble and Jorge Martin closing in, I was delighted for those extra rounds for the storyline to properly unfurl. I do wonder if when we look at this season in retrospect, there'll be bits in the middle that feel like the middle of a NASCAR season often used to for me, where it's just like none of these things are actually going to matter in the end. Which episodes of our season could we have just actually snipped before broadcasting them in retrospect?
Yeah.
On the subject of the things that do matter, now every lost point counts for the total in the end. Every point scored counts for the total in the end. Every blunder on either side adds up. However, if you're looking for a moment that set the course of this title fight, I think it is almost certainly now going to end up being Pecco Bagnaia crashing in the sprint at Sepang on Saturday as the point at which it was like, this is now how this championship is going to end. It's going to be won by Martin, because that's when it gets this late. We said last week, any blunder this late in the season could be the one that swings it. We did have a couple of questions about exactly why that crash happened. Oscar Robledo phrased it as saying, was Bagnaia's penalty, as in crashing out the race, worthy of the mistake he actually made? It didn't look like he did anything wrong ahead of the fall. And Damon Needham just said, what was the cause of Pecco's crash in the sprint? The commentator seemed confused.
There's a great big patch in the asphalt at turn 7, and it's created a bump. And he admitted that he never quite hit that point in the track all weekend while he was on that portion of the transition from brake to throttle. And he did it for the first time in the race, and the bump upset the front suspension in the front duct. So, I mean, you can see it as clear as day from the helicopter shot. There's a patch like the size of a beach ball, a beach towel, where obviously something has went wrong and someone has like dug a foot peg in and it's ripped a chunk out or something like that, and they've had to patch it, and that's the cause of it. And that's basically what happened. But I think the bigger picture, looking back across the season, which we can start to do at this point in the year, I feel, is that he's maybe got his strategy a bit wrong and has spent too much of sprint races trying to set up the bike for Sunday. And he kind of conceded to that a little bit on Saturday, speaking to Italian media, that he's kind of, hasn't focused enough on sprint races. It's remarkable, actually. If you take the sprint races out of the equation right now, it completely flips the championship and takes away Martin's 24-point lead and gives Bagnaia a 24-point lead. So all of his losses have come in the sprints.
Yeah.
He is head and shoulders clear whenever you just look at the main events. And I think that maybe that's the whole thing, is a bit of a strategic error of concentrating on the wrong part of the weekend. Arguably concentrating on the right part of the weekend because it's the big money part. But that, combined with the fact that we're riding on a knife edge at the minute because of the tyre situation, has just combined to leave him in this crazy position he's in, where he's won more races than like anyone else in modern history in a single season, but is still losing the championship.
Yeah, he's the sixth ever rider to win 10 Grand Prix or more in a Premier Class season, and if he is defeated in the end, he will be the first one to do that and lose the title. I'm not sure it's like a priorities thing for me so much as I look at it, and you say 24 points on Sunday is how much he's been outscoring Martin by, and for me that's almost like it has to be more. I know that's maybe a strange thing to say, but if you've prioritized Sundays all season, and if you were just a little better in that part of the format than Martin, and I think that's true, he has, the Ducati works team clearly around him is consistently good and getting him the absolute best package he can have on Sunday. He's consistently his best session, I would say, almost every weekend, is the Sunday race.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he's only 24 points ahead of Martin is, it's within the margin of error, and there have been enough errors to where it's even worse than that. I don't think he's set up as a rider to outscore Martin on Saturdays. It's just Martin gets quicker on the pace into the weekend. That's just the kind of rider he is. There are some riders who work methodically through the weekend and arrive at a point, and there are some riders who hit a ceiling. It is FP1, FP2, whatever. And Martin's closer to that second category. I think he was always going to have a format advantage. When the sprints came in, he was one of the riders, and maybe the prototypical rider who we earmarked as, okay, this is good for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, well, I should say, I know I'm very confident this is not what Simon meant, but I'm sure it will come up at some point. The fact Martin, if he does win this title, the fact Martin has won it on the sprints is fine. That's the format. I mean, that's, those races are hard. And if he's done it, he's played to the format and he's played the game perfectly, that does not make it less valuable.
No, I really strongly feel that mastering this format of short race, longer race, less practice, more practice sessions really counting for something, qualifying early in the morning, racing again later in the day, a bazillion rounds on the calendar, tyres that go up and down in the ways they do. This format and all of those things make this such a hard MotoGP championship to win. And just absolutely fair play to the both of them for everything they're doing. It's so impressive, despite the fact they've fallen over so many times. Val?
I also want to just urge a word of caution. 24-point lead. It feels like Martin won it this weekend, but I imagine it also felt that Valencia and Rossi won it at Estoril in 2006, and then he extremely did not win it in the end. You can lose a 24-point lead. I've looked at the season so far. In 19 rounds, so Martin needs 14 points any which way in any combination in Barcelona. He's scored 14 or more at 16 out of the 19 rounds, and there has not been a single round in which Bagnaia has outscored him enough. But that does not mean it cannot happen. We're going to a cold Barcelona. It's a tricky track. Weird stuff happens at Valencia. Weird stuff can happen in Barcelona too. I think we'll get to the change of venue specifically, but it's not over. It's not one yet. If this MotoGP season has taught us anything, I think it should be that.
Yeah, and when we're referencing Valencia 2006 as well, I'd actually thought of that with Bagnaia's crash in the sprint on Saturday, because I was like, well, it's like a Valentino Rossi tribute if he loses the championship with a really rubbish-looking crash in the end, just as Rossi did at Valencia that year. we're not going to look ahead to the finale loads in this episode, because next week I'll be making these two and myself do so many Larry predictions about all kinds of elements of what will happen in the decider. And there'll be a fair few single sentence challenges relating to eras that are ending as well. So that's next week's episode. If you want to be part of all the things we've got going on in the Race Members Club, by the way, head for the-race.com/members-club, or look for us on Patreon, search for The Race. There's the Riders tier on Patreon if you just want the bikes extras, or you can join the other tiers or the main Members Club on the website and have everything we do, F1 and MotoGP bonus-wise. In the gap before Barcelona, we'll be doing another MotoGP extra where we hammer through a load of your questions that we haven't got to in these post-race episodes. There'll be at least one rider exclusive too. Now is a really good time to join the Members Club if you're not in it yet, because Simon has conducted interviews with what percentage of the grid? 75, 80? It's big, isn't it?
Oh, I'm going to quickly find my list. Mir Salvadori, Bastianini, Espargaro, Alonso, Quartararo, Marini, Nakagami, Zarco, Fernandez, Marquez, Binder, the other Fernandez, Rins, and Di Gianantonio.
It's quite a lot in there. I lost count during that. But it's a lot. But basically, all of those uncut in full for the Members Club. They'll appear in the main feed in smaller chunks, smashed around the episodes. But if you want the whole lot, join the Members Club, where we'll also be delving into Rossi's sports car season soon. We'll also be answering loads more of your questions and doing other Larry things that I haven't even told these two about yet. Back to the questions for this episode, though, as a quick look ahead to Barcelona I will let us indulge in. It's Hammer Time 03 says, has Martin signing for Aprilia removed the constant need to prove himself to Ducati and removed the pressure and let him just get on with finishing races? He's taken settling for the best result tactic to a new level with his run of P2 finishes. I think It's Hammer Time said this after the sprint, that he was on 15 for the year in all races. It'd be 16 now after the Grand Prix. It's Hammer Time. These two shook their heads in unison at that thought. And I have to say, my first thought was Martin did completely blow it at the Sachsenring at a time when the pressure of proving himself to Ducati was well and truly gone. He has been so consistent and by his standards so sensible for much of this year, but you guys don't think that's got anything to do with what his future looks like?
No, because I think because there's a different kind of pressure for me, and it's a more pressing pressure than proving yourself to Ducati or whatever, because I think Jorge Martin, before the silly season shook out, I suspect Jorge Martin existed under the impression that on-track stuff won't actually fully decide the 2025 choice. It'll just be maneuvering, and ultimately the maneuvering worked out against him. The pressure is that the Aprilia will not win anything next year, so that's the pressure. You win this year or you do not win. I'm sorry, Aprilia. You're my new target, I guess. I don't know.
For me, actually, Jorge Martin said it the best himself on Saturday, and I've just went and found the exact quote because I shared it afterwards. He said, "Last year I wasn't ready to win. I was fast, but I wasn't ready. This year I'm a lot more mature." And that for me is that's why he's more sensible this year, because he is a bit more mature about it, and he's just not as Larry. So I don't think it's a pressure thing. I think it's a him turning into a more rounded character thing. Basically, he's better this year.
What does he know? What do people who see him every weekend know? I know what Jorge Martin is like, and for me, as every other result in racing, it's just all random chance and numbers. This year, he's just crashed a little bit less through randomness.
Foul trying to moneyball his way out of this.
Yeah. You know what? The thing is, I put on this sarcastic sort of affectation to make it sound like I'm taking...
But you 100% believe it.
Yeah. You bet.
I do think there's a bit of truth potentially in what It's Hammer Time said here in terms of the psychological shift for Martin after the need to prove himself to Ducati, the feeling snubbed by Ducati has been so big in his head for so long, and suddenly it's bigger than ever. But also it's irrelevant now. That's done. The chances of him ever being a factory Ducati rider in MotoGP are probably done now. You can't never say never, etc. He's not that old, but still. That dream is probably over. It definitely is for the short term. But like you hinted at, Val, it's coupled with the other changes of psychology that comes from I'm moving to a worse bike now, and the Aprilia's got a lot worse since he signed for it. A few months ago, I published a column of Val's on the race website where the original headline, I can't remember the phrasing, but the original headline I put on it basically said Martin's last chance to win a MotoGP title, and Val was like, "Whoa, don't pin that on me. That's not my headline." There's so much of his career to go. It's not necessarily his last chance. Surely it's not his last chance. I would just counter that with you just never know when you leave a championship quality bike or car or team if you'll ever really get that chance again. Yes, he could be incredible at Aprilia. Even if he isn't, people could look at what he's done these last few years and go, we've got to get him back on a proper factory bike for a top team. It's going to happen. 2 years' time, he could be winning a championship for, I don't know, Honda or whatever. But right now, that's not the immediate reality. Right now, he's moving to a bike that I haven't really seen, particularly in the coverage of the last few races, because it's basically done nothing apart from the odd single lap. Quick one from Mies. I think we'll get these two going a little bit. Mies says, how do you look at the super tense championship being potentially decided on a Saturday during the sprint? I personally wouldn't like it. It would make the very last race on Sunday rather useless. Now, Mies, as someone who's made the weekend childcare and loft re-insulation plan for the finale weekend around thinking Saturday would be quieter than Sunday, I agree. It's just not convenient. Simon, how would you feel if it's all settled in a sprint race on a Saturday?
I wouldn't be a particularly big fan of it, but there would be a little bit of me that would take Schadenfreude from watching the TV, see what the TV coverage would do on Sunday, because they've spent the last 10 races just following the two guys at the front, and we continually miss good racing further down the pack. So part of me would like to see, I really want, there's other interesting title battles that I want to see. I want to see who wins top non-Ducati between Acosta and Binder. I want to see who wins third place between Marquez and Enea Bastianini, which is currently separated by a point. So actually, if it won on Saturday, it might mean that we get to see some of the other people on track a little bit. And I wouldn't be particularly opposed to that. Because I'm also absolutely certain that we're going to have a ridiculous, elaborate, over-the-top title winning on track celebration that I am going to hate. I am going to absolutely despise it. And let's just get that crap out of the way on Saturday. I've never forgiven them for the Fabio Quartararo CGI 10-story high dancing devil, but I fully expect something like that again if Martin wins, especially. So yeah, let's just do it on Saturday. Be fine with that.
I weirdly have fond memories of the CGI devil. It's the thing that I don't like orchestrated celebrations at all. I think that one just, when I remember it, I also remember how just utterly lost amid it all Fabio seemed, and it was genuinely weirdly quite human in how sort of he was so emotional that he was ignoring all the insane stuff that's going around. There was something genuinely so memorable and so weird about it, so avant-garde. But yeah, no, and I would not mind it at all if it's decided on Saturday. It's a little stinky for the title celebrations, I guess. You prefer it that everybody, once the title is settled, that everybody can just go away for a bit and ruminate on that a little, I guess. But for me, it's no different if it was settled at Sepang this Sunday. Yeah. Or I don't know. I've seen a lot of dead rubber racing in my time. The only way to fix that is to introduce playoffs. Nobody wants that.
No, we don't need that.
Obviously,
we do not need that.
I mean, you say that, but it works effectively in British Superbike Championship.
Yes.
I'm not advocating for it in MotoGP, but it does work well.
I just feel like that would somehow make the season even longer. Basically, that needs 45 races to fit that, and they wouldn't just be happy with lopping off the last few for that.
Yeah, let's not do that. Forget I said it.
The Race F1 podcast is brought to you by Merrill. It's no secret that finances can get complicated. Like me, I'm sure many of you listening will have financial goals. Perhaps it's even saving up for that trip to a Grand Prix far afield. Whatever your goals are, from starting a business to saving for kids' college to getting more stamps in your passport, you want a straightforward path there. But life tends to have other plans, and things get in your way. Merrill understands that. That's why with a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalised plan that can help keep your money in sync with your life. So with the bull at your back, no matter what life brings, you get a clear path forward. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer. Registered investment advisor. Member SIPC.
As you've probably heard by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code The Athletic, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code The Athletic. Make your first deposit of at least $10. Place your first bet on any game and claim your voucher for a 1-year subscription to The Athletic. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code The Athletic, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager.
As we said at the outset, this was a strange and somber weekend for the MotoGP community, because as they were arriving at Sepang, news was coming through from Spain of the absolutely horrific events with the floods in Valencia and all the tragedy around that. Really, really horrible scenes. Naturally, just through sheer logistics, a lot of people in the MotoGP world's thoughts went on to the fact they were going to be racing there in a couple of weeks. But this was about more than logistics, wasn't it, Simon? This is home to a lot of people in the MotoGP family. How did those first days in the paddock feel with all this unfolding so far away but so relevant to everyone?
Horrible. Absolutely horrible. The fact that it came in week 7 of a trip where most people haven't been home as well means that people were already, like, people always get to this point in the season and they're a bit not very happy. And then the fact that, like, so the Valencian team is Aspar in Moto2 and Moto3. They're an absolutely phenomenal bunch of people. Everyone in the paddock loves the Aspar guys. Everyone in the paddock knows the Aspar guys because they've all been here so long. 6 of the team have lost their cars. Their cars haven't been destroyed. The cars they don't know where they are. They're gone from their houses. Their press officer was showing me photos of, like, the high water mark in his living room that's 2.5 meters high. And these guys are still here racing motorbikes and are on a flight home on Sunday night to go home, and they have no idea what they're going home to. Some of them don't even know if they're going to get home because the roads to their houses are still destroyed. And the whole paddock has just been, especially Thursday, no one cared about MotoGP in the paddock. The first question we asked Maverick on Thursday in his debrief was, like, what was the expectations of this weekend? And he was like, I don't know. I haven't even thought about it. I haven't thought about motorbikes this week. And that kind of summed up the whole paddock mood. It's been as low as I remember the paddock being in terms of mood. It's been horrible. Really horrible. And no one has really cared about the race in Valencia. It's not been about the race in Valencia. It's not been about trying to figure out what's happening with the race. It's just been about Valencia, the city, the people. And I know that horrible things happen all around the world all the time. And I'm taking nothing away from any of those things. But this is somewhere that the paddock knows intimately. There's a shopping center right next to the circuit, or a little bit close to the circuit, and you go in the evening and it's full of restaurants, and every restaurant has a team in it. Everyone is in Bonaire all the time, and there's stories of, like, dozens of bodies being brought out of the underground car park in it, and it's just devastating. It's horrendous because it's so close to home.
Yeah, the way riders were talking on Thursday, particularly, I wasn't surprised, but I also really admired how much MotoGP was put down everyone's priority list. That there didn't seem to be any urgency or clamour for where would the final round be. I absolutely believed Pecco Bagnaia in his willingness just to let the championship end at Sepang if needed. Even if that was title lost for him. As a result, I think we've not to demean any previous eras at all, but I do think we've got a really human paddock at the moment in MotoGP, and riders who think about the wider world in a way that perhaps some past sports people didn't as extensively at times. And that really shone through this weekend. We do have a few members' questions about particular elements of the way the weekend was handled, and obviously we want to talk about how MotoGP communicated things around what would happen with the final round as well. Oscar Robledo wondered if it was crass to be talking about whether the last race of the season should happen at a time when Spain hasn't even started grieving because they're still finding bodies. I think, yes, it would have been, and like I say, I'm glad that MotoGP as a group collectively didn't talk about the last race of the season too much and prioritise things in some of the ways they did. He also asked, Simon, as you're at the circuit, can you confirm if the minute's silence was actually observed? Because the audio feed indicated that wasn't actually the case. Was there actual silence for it from where you were?
I'm gonna go a little bit further back and talk about the big picture before I answer Oscar's question, because I feel like I have to. We all had a fair idea that there wasn't going to be a race in Valencia, even though no one really cared if there was going to be a race in Valencia or not because of what we were watching. But Dorna clearly wanted to make that decision with the local authorities and whatever. But they adopted this bizarre communication strategy of then simply not talking about Valencia at all until they had made the decision. So we went all day on Friday without a single message, apart from one brief statement on their social media. The World Feed commentators wouldn't even say the word Valencia. They were talking about the situation at home when talking about riders who were clearly unhappy. You cannot be a sport in which, unfortunately, but factually, people routinely lose their lives and not be good at disaster emergency communications. And Dorna have absolutely been shown up multiple times in the past, but also on this weekend as not being good at it. They handled it really badly. The only semi-official statement that was released was a rather bullish Carmelo Espeleta doorstep interview with a Spanish newspaper saying, we're going to race in Valencia, like he does. He shouldn't be allowed to speak to the media, full stop, at this point. And that awful strategy extended to the fact that for the first time in my entire 8-9 seasons in MotoGP, we had a minute's silence where no one was informed beforehand.
Oh.
There was no email sent out to tell the teams that it was happening. There was no message sent out through the media channels like there usually is. Normally we get at least 8 hours notice for these sort of things. For when riders have tragically lost their lives, from when members of the media have lost their lives and they've done a minute's silence that no one outside the media centre ever sees, but it still happens. They didn't tell anyone that this one was happening. So, yeah, the reason that there wasn't a lot of silence is because most of the paddock didn't know it was happening, which is a disgrace, frankly. It felt like they were trying to bury the news all weekend. It felt like... I'm not going to go on and say what it felt like, actually, because that would be disrespectful. But it felt horrible. They really, really messed up this weekend in terms of how they handled this.
Another question on the minute silence from Angelina, who appreciated the fact it happened and is very pro that respect being paid, but wondered if moments before the race start was the most appropriate place for it in terms of rider focus and distraction. She said many of them are Spanish and they may well know people directly affected by events. Don't get me wrong, I feel like a minute of silence was very much needed, but why not do it before the podium or something? It's such an emotionally charged moment just before the race. It's commonplace to hold a minute silence at the start of a sporting event in that context, but I see the point there, maybe in terms of how personal this was for a lot of the riders on track.
We were told it wouldn't happen again.
Okay.
After Jason de Pasquier's death in Mugello, because Pecco Bagnaia admitted that really emotionally damaged him to the point that he crashed out a couple of corners into the race, and he basically led a bit of a rider's revolt that it wouldn't happen anymore. But Dorna does what Dorna wants. None of the riders were consulted about it, that's for sure. And like I said, no one was even told. I don't know what communications the team got, but as a broader, I know it's not just media that weren't told. I've been speaking to sponsors. I've been speaking to other people that weren't informed about it either. So
it's always a challenging balance working in a sport when things that I would class as actually important happen in the world. Ultimately, what we're doing here is pretty trivial in the grand scheme of the universe. When something like the floods and the tragedy in Valencia happens, you almost feel a little bit guilty sometimes that your job is just reporting on, talking about a sport or participating in a sport versus doing something that feels like it's actually for kind of human good. There's an old school attitude that still racing in Valencia or something like that would be spirit raising for the people of Valencia and that kind of thing, which whenever MotoGP gets back to Valencia, and I imagine that will be next season, I'm sure there'll be people in that community who are delighted to see it back, and having been through so much in the interim, it'll lift their spirits, and they'll be proud of what they've accomplished in that time since things were so devastating for them. But I think the solution of racing somewhere else, but with Valencia being paid tribute to, is a much better solution than trying to somehow make a race happen at Valencia as soon as possible in these circumstances.
So two things there. One, someone has literally just sent me, Juan on Twitter has literally just tweeted me some pictures of the circuit, and the road into the circuit is stone ruins. And no one in MotoGP wants to see construction workers repairing the road into the circuit whenever the road into people's houses isn't repaired. And that's why we're not going there, essentially. That's the reason why no one in the paddock wants to go there. We don't want to divert resources. Dorna, among all the many missteps they made in the communications this weekend, for me, they missed the very, very obvious thing that they could have done. Yes, we want to go back to Valencia as soon as possible. Yes, we want to, help stimulate the economy. We know that there's 2 races in the calendar next year that probably aren't going to happen in Argentina and Hungary. Just make Valencia the reserve circuit. Go to Valencia twice next season whenever at least one of those races is eventually cancelled. Give them an extra Grand Prix next year and do it that way. There's ways we could have that the paddock could have tried to help give back. I feel like that weren't taken. But I hope that I have mixed feelings about having the final race in Spain, as do a lot of riders, because a lot of riders are suggesting that Spain will still very much be in mourning, the whole of Spain, in 10 days' time, and that's not the place to be having a party, essentially, like the end of the season always is. So there's a lot of riders not very happy about that. But I'm also glad that we get to do what we can for Valencia in Spain, even if it's not in Valencia. So,
I mean, it is part why I thought it was fair, outside of the communication strategy specifically, I thought it was fair to wait and see whether, until you're basically told, no, don't come. Do not come. We're not ready to have you. There's no time for that right now. I think you can envision a scenario, probably in different time frames, where actually coming could be good for the local economy, for just, just it could be good. It is, sport can sometimes be good in that way. Clearly that wasn't going to be the case this year. And also, even if the track was totally fine, even if, all the infrastructure was fixed by then, we mentioned the CGI Devil earlier today. Imagine the Jorge Martin, Pecco Bagnaia CGI Devil, the dancing, the jubilation, kilometers away from ruins. I mean, you cannot have it. That's clear.
Logistical question on this topic as well. Damon Needham says, how are they actually going to organise a MotoGP round in just 2 weeks, unexpectedly, effectively? What would be the most difficult elements they've got to pull together, in your opinion, Simon?
I mean, we should say that we're recording this on Sunday evening after the race, and they haven't actually officially announced it's going to be Barcelona yet, because of another Dorna communications blunder, where the whole paddock knows that it's going to be in Barcelona. Carlos Espeleta, the sporting director, has been on TV telling everyone it's going to be in Barcelona, but they haven't officially put out a statement confirming it's going to be in Barcelona. And whenever you read what he says or what he said, it's all quite speculative. But the reason that we know it, the first reason we knew it was going to be in Barcelona is because they'd already started the logistics build up today, and it went around all the teams handing out their travel documentation to ship stuff home to Barcelona for the race. And things like the stickers that go in the frame of the bike so that the scrutineers can check that the bike is homologated for that weekend and things like that. So the logistics operation very quickly started, and they're very good at that side of things. The biggest question for me is the one that's still to be answered as of right now, and that's what the fan access is going to be like, because that's actually where the real hurdle comes from, especially in Barcelona, because so much of Barcelona is plug and play for MotoGP in terms of putting on a race there, because they know the circuit so well, they know the facilities so well, that a lot of the paddock stuff, a lot of the TV broadcast stuff, they can assemble in their sleep. If they need to rent stuff in, they know the contractors that they need to rent it in from, because it's people they use all the time. Stuff like that's easy. The biggest question mark for me, the biggest logistical complication is things like, where do you find the 1,000 security guards you probably need to police the circuit for the weekend on 10 days notice? Especially if there's, let's say, another event on in Barcelona that weekend, or, where do you rent all the portaloos from? It's all those things that are going to be the biggest hurdle. The circuit have a far bigger job than Dorna have for putting this on. And we might see some sort of a limited fan access as a result of that. Thinking like COVID times when we didn't have full capacity crowds. But we don't know right now. And I think they'll probably spend Monday sussing out what's possible before they make any firm statement. And that's probably why we don't know anything officially yet.
While we're on the topic of things not being handled particularly well, there's been a bit of an expectation from the Race Members Club questioners that we're not going to be that impressed with how Jack Miller's first lap crash in the Grand Prix was handled in terms of the coverage of it. Val, before we get into that element, do you want to quickly run through, for any listeners who haven't seen the crash, exactly what unfolded? Because it wasn't really what it seemed when you saw the end of it, was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit, because that's just the type of layout to where just something has to go wrong through that, between those two corners, for that to be the outcome, and it was the outcome we had. Basically, for one reason or another, coming into turn one, Alex Marquez went a little bit wide, because turn two is quite sharp. He really tried very hard to reclaim the racing line, to maybe cut off any more position losses. He hadn't gone super, super wide, so he was still in the vicinity of the race. It's not like he's returning off track. But in returning, he comes across Fabio Quartararo and Brad Binder. Fabio manages to check up. I don't know if he hit the brake or he didn't. Not very clear from the available footage, but basically he did manage to check up. But there's an impact on the outside curb, or very close to the outside curb, between Alex Marquez and Brad Binder. Binder's aero gets wrenched pretty badly. Binder, who was at lean angle at that point, picks up the bike, and in doing so, he basically goes perpendicular to the next corner. And in doing so, he collects two more riders in the process. He goes with Fabio Quartararo, he goes with Jack Miller. And then it's a total bad mess as a result. Everyone's down, everyone's flying around. Miller's head gets sent into Quartararo's rear wheel. Miller's legs then get run over by Joan Mir's Honda. Just very painful, very unpleasant incident, and thankfully, miraculously, everybody's basically more or less fine. I think Binder's nursing a left shoulder knock that he'll probably get checked out. Miller, some bruising by the sounds of it. Fabio did a whole race and did quite a good race. So
after that crash unfolded, we saw the red flags. We hadn't seen much of what happened at that point, apart from the initial shot of it. We had a few questions about this, but I'm going to go with Damon Needham's one, because I think I like how it's phrased. Do you guys have issues with them showing the replay of the accident with Miller's head caught in the back wheel of Quartararo's bike? Yes, Damon, we do. I'm going to continue your question, because I do like how you've put it. I know they noted all riders are conscious, but just because you're conscious doesn't mean you're okay. Is there a better way to handle the balance between showing fans what happened and making sure everyone is okay first?
So whether they knew it or not, Miller was clearly okayer than we thought. I think that somehow that ended up being true in that moment. I mean, he was basically out of the medical center immediately. So we don't know what exactly the rescue workers arrived to at the scene, because from the helicopter camera, for instance, you can see that he's not moving for a good few seconds. But then it makes sense that he's not moving given what he just went through. And maybe they realized pretty quickly, he's basically fine. He was being attended to for quite a while, which also makes sense to me because it looked like the fact that he was conscious. Okay, let me restart differently. I know Simon will have different examples, and there are examples of this rule not being true, but sometimes in motor racing broadcasting, showing of a replay is occasionally used as a shorthand for trust us, it's not so bad. Trust us, actually, nobody's died, nobody's life is in danger. I don't know if that was the intention or not. I really do doubt it. But it felt like the bit of footage that was shown was just basically not pre-screened. Or at least, I don't know because I only saw it once. I definitely did not go to seek it out again. But it looked like a serious neck injury at best. To have that play into everybody's eyeballs and then to go, okay, restart in 20 minutes. Tough. Not great. Not good.
Here's my fundamental problem with your logic, Val. I've watched MotoGP replay a crash where someone died.
But that was a 11.
They replayed Jason Pasquier's crash while he was receiving CPR in the middle of the track.
Okay.
I do not trust these people to have any human empathy whenever it comes to making these decisions, because they have proven over and over again that they are completely callous about it. They replay it because they think it gets viewership. That's why they do it. There is a time and a place for replaying bad crashes. It's whenever you know the person's okay. That's when it is. And I don't care if they think that they know the person's okay sitting in a TV broadcast set. Watch the timeline. You can see it clear as day. They replayed the crash before the MotoGP medical team had reached Miller. The trackside medics had reached him, but the MotoGP medical team hadn't. So the people making the is the rider okay call is a TV director. It's not a medic. And that's the fundamental problem. They famously and tragically put on screen that Showa Tomizawa was conscious and okay. And he was dead at Misano in 2011. These people cannot be trusted to make this call. They don't do it for the right reasons. I don't know what else I can say to it. They do not do it for the right intentions, as much as I appreciate you're giving them the benefit of the doubt, Val. They don't.
No, I don't. It was a nice thought to hang on to in the moment.
We watched Jason Pasquier get CPR in the middle of the track for 45 minutes on a Dorna camera. These people do not have empathy when it comes to replays and clips like this.
I do think I just blocked out the Pasquier thing completely.
I can still see as clear as if I'd watched it 5 seconds ago the clip of the paramedic hanging a bag of blood above Paul Espargaro in the gravel trap in Portimao. It's over and over and over again. That's the thing. This is over and over and over again that this happens.
I mean, at this point, we are all in general agreement that this should not be the case and that it does not add to the TV product, to put it in the most callous words I can use. At this point, should also not the people buying the TV product, so the individual broadcasters, also go, hey, stop?
From what I understand, that happens.
Okay.
On everything I've said today about Dorna, I'm just going to leave it by saying, does anyone really think that Liberty Media is going to come into this sport and make it worse?
Yeah, the point you made, Val, about it can sometimes be a shorthand, the replays being shown, so therefore the person's okay. My worry with that is always that varies a lot across championships. I don't think actually MotoGP is the worst for replaying bad accidents, and there are other forms of motorsport, I won't name them at this point, where I just have no qualms whatsoever about what they re-show and when they do it. I genuinely don't think MotoGP is the worst offender for that. I'm not saying MotoGP is good, but there are worse ones out there. Because of that, you can't be sure it's a shorthand for this rider or driver is okay when you see a crash replay. Just across the board, there just has to be a firmer, we won't do this until we know the situation, not just off the first little message from someone who may or may not have the full picture. Just be really, really confident that you're not replaying someone having not just a life-ending incident, but probably a life-changing one as well, is probably sufficient, that you don't need to see that.
do you know what the most ridiculous thing about this? This doesn't happen in World Superbikes, which is also owned by Dorna. They get it right. Like, it is specifically a Dorna MotoGP problem. Yeah, the Superbikes guys are really good at this. And are not afraid to show a replay, but they do it once they know the full condition of the rider. Yeah, it's odd how, of all the forms of motorsport I watch, it's odd how much they stand out in MotoGP for the callousness of it.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer. Registered investment advisor. Member SIPC.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, you know, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer. Registered investment advisor. Member SIPC.
With so much going on in the championship battle and so many bigger picture world events affecting MotoGP right now, we've not focused on much of the rest of the field in this episode, but we will be putting that right through the course of the winter. But there is one team I do want to squeeze in to the tail end, and that's Yamaha, which had a really genuinely encouraging weekend. Like Val says, he's off after Aprilia now. He's a committed Yamaha fan, I reckon. It was impressive in terms of the speed and result, with Quartararo finishing the race sixth. Now, at the end of the race, I said to you guys, look, Alex Rins only 4 seconds behind Quartararo. Clearly, Yamaha really is making progress for them, to be so closely matched. But it could have been so much better when it emerged the state of things Quartararo was actually riding in that race. Yeah.
So it was a spare bike. It was a lightly used rear tire. It was a front tire that he didn't like, and it was a spare bike with an engine that I think is closer to the end of its lifespan, so not delivering too much power. So we came into the weekend and Yamaha had a new engine introduced that they trialed in the Misano test, and they debuted it here, and it was supposed to give a burst of top end power. Now, how much that actually conveyed, I'm not entirely sure at the end, but when they ran super well on Friday, the impression was, ooh, that's a lot of power. Good stuff. Going well. As it turned out, Fabio Quartararo blew his version of the engine almost immediately, so he didn't have it for the entire weekend. And Alex Rins did, but he was maybe half a step to a step behind throughout the weekend. And they just looked good. Like, with what they had, they just looked good. Clearly, the track layout combined with I presume the tire allocation, I'm guessing, that was on offer. I'm guessing the harder tires were good to them. I can only imagine, because again, there was a bit of a one lap speed deficit despite both bikes being in Q2, but that's because Quartararo's practice pace is just superb. Is genuinely, like, if you told me he's going to finish on the podium third behind the two championship leaders, I would have believed that coming out of Friday or out of Saturday. So,
well, Val, do you think that was actually a realistic result? Because Mitch from the Members Club says, without all those issues, could you have been battling with the Neo Bastianini for third if he hadn't been part of that crash?
Man, it's almost possible. I wouldn't, probably no. And also, Mark did crash out of third, which would have been the legitimate third. But
yeah, inherited third for Yamaha right now is still like party central, isn't it? Though
he did say after finishing sixth in the sprint that a bit of a better engine there, the one that he'd lost, would have left him closer to the group in front, but not in it. And I think that's probably realistic for Sunday as well. Closer but not there. But they're quite looking forward to going to Barcelona on a circuit where they had an absolute disaster earlier this year, because they want to see if things are better. And that's the best place to do it, at a track we've already been to this year, and it was awful. But the weird thing is that they seem to have spent so long chasing a new bike and new bits to the bike that they've just absolutely neglected the electronics, and that's where all the improvements are coming from. Just working on what they've already got with the stock control magnetic electronic system. And actually, that might mean that they're going to look a bit stupid at the end of the season, because the answer has been staring them in the face the whole time. But it also might mean that they have found something that they can take to Barcelona and go better with. And it's a good place. It's a good place for them to finish the season at, and it's also a good place for them to have the post-race test that will almost certainly happen there now as well, because it means they've got a full day to work on the electronics and try and figure out stuff for next year.
It's more complicated than that. I'm 100% sure of it, but both Quartar and Rins basically suggested that more power in hand. Now that's the electronics change.
Yeah, they can actually use the power that's there.
It would be quite funny if Yamaha have built a V4 simply to solve a problem that was fixable by their own electronics engineers all the time, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's been an expensive way of solving that problem.
But also, let's not. All right, well, let's do this. Let's not also crown them, I guess, as the new champions of the world or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Foul reverts to form.
I mean, still got beaten by one GP23, would have got beat by the other too if the other finished the race.
Yeah. Still going to compare that to whatever Honda's weekend that I didn't particularly notice, apart from Johan Zarco being short-term genius again. Yeah, there's a pretty clear...
In that sense, the 2017 KTM is the best bike on earth compared to the 2016 KTM, which didn't exist. So...
All right. Let's end on a similar note with something we haven't actually touched in this episode yet that I think many of you are just gagging to throw at Simon. As Dan Neal puts it, Simon, it's looking good for a satellite bike champion. And Eric Yip says he's basically preparing the T-shirt that one of the other members mentioned last week, the Satellite Teams Don't Win Championships T-shirt for Simon to wear at the finale. If you're relatively new to this podcast, throughout last year's title fight and the first 80% of this one, Simon, without fail, would declare that no one wins a MotoGP championship as a satellite team rider. In fairness, he put in a lot of practical reasons around resources, the drain of a long season, when you get to the flyaways and stuff, and how that affected the smaller team. It wasn't just a rant. There was logic there as well. However, Jorge Martin's going to win this, Simon, almost certainly, unless he really reverts to very, very old school Jorge Martin. Val's making the sort of wizard movement at me as I say that, so confidently.
Val's trying to put a curse on him, I think.
I'm not, no, that's for the record. I'm not trying to do that.
If Jorge Martin wins this title on a satellite bike, which it's looking very much like he will, it will be testament to Ducati more than anything else for running just about the fairest title battle between two different teams in history. Because I genuinely thought there would be subtle factory interference to make sure that it didn't happen come this point in the season. And they are, to a fault, not doing that, and fair play to them for it.
Just like Val said they would.
It's because the opposite would look so bad. Because it would look so bad. You're already dominating the championship. Give us this. I think that's been. I think that the PR penalty of that would be worse than the PR penalty of losing the number one plate, which they might very well be about to do.
I disagree completely. I think history and the wider audience would not notice or care, but I'm glad Ducati has not thought that way and has made this absolutely amazing title battle possible.
Like I gotta, this is unrelated, I just gotta bring it up. Of course, the 2016 KTM did exist. Mika Kallio wildcarded in the final round of that season.
There you go.
I picked a bad example. The joke was still good. I stand by it.
For what it's worth, on your point, Matt, the people that listen to our podcast would always remember Ducati interfering in the title. But the people that listen to our podcast are diehard MotoGP fans, and they're not the ones you're trying to convince. And I think that it will damage the brand slightly. Because I really hope that Jorge Martin takes the number 1 plate. I mean, 89 isn't even his number. His number's 88, and he's only using 89 because Oliveira stole it from him. So just commit, run the number 1 at Aprilia.
Use of the word stole, I slightly object to.
It should be reallocated. Numbers should be reallocated at the end of every season based on performance. The higher the championship, the higher your preference should be.
It's not even doing in championship order, just that you. Yeah, okay.
I would like it in reverse championship order. That would be really funny. Give the number 1 plate to whoever scored the fewest points full time. Luca Marini, I like your season. Enjoy the number 1 plate.
Luca Marini with a slash through the 0 on his 10.
I was going to say I thought Val had done well to end the title decider fortnight episode on the note of Mika Kallio on a KTM wildcard at the end of 2016, but now with Val's reverse numbering system, he's made things even stranger. So let's stop it there. Thank you for your patience, listeners. Next week we'll be predicting. Apparently, I need to listen back, but apparently I pretty much predicted the exact events of Valencia 2023 in our preceding episodes. So let's see if I can do the same for Barcelona 2024. Join us next week to find out what we come up with.
The Athletic.